He stood in line for 46 minutes. No chair, no help, just a folded paper in one hand and silence in the other. When he finally reached the counter, the clerk didn't look up. She just scanned the form, scoffed and said, "Sir, this claim was denied last month. You people keep coming back like it's going to change something." The room wasn't crowded, but everyone heard her. A younger man snickered 2 seats away. Someone behind him muttered, "Bet he's lying like half of them." The old man didn't speak. He didn't flinch. He just blinked slow, like he'd heard worse in places where bombs dropped and radios never answered. The clerk continued, "If you really served, maybe your file wouldn't be this incomplete." Next. And that's when it happened. A phone, not his, not anyone's in the room, rang. Not a cell. A landline. From the office behind the glass. The red one. The one marked priority. The one no one ever touched. Until now. The supervisor picked it up, and her face drained of color. "Yes, sir. He's right here." Then she looked at the veteran like she'd just seen a ghost. And in that moment, no one questioned who he was anymore. Stick around. Because what he did next wasn't loud, but it changed everything. The building was cold. Government cold. Fluorescent lighting that hummed just a little too loud. Chairs lined up like cattle stalls. Carpet worn from decades of shuffling feet and forgotten names. He stood at window 3, just like the letter told him to. He had one envelope, one form, one war behind him, and apparently none of that mattered. The clerk didn't look up at first. She was typing something, probably lunch orders or an email she'd never send. Her nails were long, fake, and painted red like authority. When she did glance up, her eyes were already annoyed. Name. He gave it. Social. He gave that too. She sighed, clicked, scrolled, then smirked. "Yeah. This file's been flagged. Says here it was closed due to insufficient verification. Which means you didn't submit the right proof." Again. She said again like it was a crime. Like coming back to ask for what he earned was shameful. He didn't reply. Didn't flinch. She leaned back in her chair, popped gum. "You people are all the same. You come in here thinking a patch and a story means the government owes you something." The man behind him cleared his throat, said under his breath, "Another fake vet trying to cash in." A chuckle followed from somewhere near window 1. The clerk noticed. She smiled wider, like this was entertainment now. "You don't even have a DD-214 on file. No active ID. No digital confirmation. No next of kin on record. You sure you're even who you say you are?" He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a photo. It was creased, folded, black and white. 8 men. Uniforms. Dust. Desert. She didn't take it, just scoffed. "Sir, we don't accept ancient history as official documentation. That's probably from a movie set. Or your Facebook." Someone behind laughed again. "Bet he found that photo at a garage sale." His fingers clenched slightly, but not into a fist. Just into the photo. Tighter. The clerk snapped her gum again. "Here's what you're gonna do, okay? You're gonna step aside, take your little story, and maybe try again when you have some real paperwork. Next." She motioned to the next person in line. That's when it rang. Not a cell phone. Not a desk phone. The red one. The one in the glass room behind her. The one labeled, "Direct Clearance, Level 5. Everyone froze. Even the gum stopped moving. A supervisor in a navy blazer walked out, picked it up slowly. "Benefits office, Supervisor Granger speaking." Her eyes changed, like someone flipped a switch behind them. She stood straighter. "Yes, sir. He's here. Standing right at window 3. The room went dead silent. She hung up, walked toward the clerk, who was now pale, shrinking into her chair. "Step away from the desk," the supervisor said. "Wah? Now." The old man still hadn't moved, didn't smile, didn't look surprised. Because men like him don't wait for justice. They carry it, and sometimes they just have to remind the system who built it in the first place. The door closed with a soft hiss. Not like in movies. Not dramatic. Just enough to say, This is no longer public. The room was simple. Cream walls, frosted glass, one table, two chairs, a landline, and a single file already waiting at the center of the table, closed but thick, worn, its corners creased like it had been opened many times, but never by anyone in this building. Dean, no name was said yet, but we'll use that now, didn't sit. He stood, hands behind his back, eyes scanning not for danger but layout, exits, angles, placement of the vent in the ceiling, habit, muscle memory. Across the glass, the clerk who had humiliated him earlier was pacing. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She was processing. Her voice filtered through faintly. Why didn't anyone tell me? He looked like nothing. Like just some old guy. Another voice responded. Lower, firmer. The supervisor. You're not cleared to know who he is. Silence. Then, is this political? No. Another pause. It's structural. Back in the room, Dean's eyes landed on the folder. He didn't touch it. Didn't need to, because he knew what was in it. Every page, every year, every name they erased but never really could. Minutes passed. Then the door opened. A man stepped in.
No suit.
No tie. Just a black tactical jacket, standard issue boots, and eyes that scanned like a drone. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't need to. He placed a key card on the table. Then a second folder. This one thinner. Stamped with a seal most people never see in real life. The man spoke softly, controlled. Sir, we apologize for what happened outside. Your designation was classified under deep hold for over 2 decades. Many systems don't even recognize the protocols anymore. Dean raised one eyebrow. Slightly. That's not my problem. No, sir. It's ours. The agent swallowed. 3 minutes after your ID was manually triggered at that window, we received a cross-jump alert from Langley, then a parallel ping from Northcom, which means someone still had you on the contingency list. Dean looked at the second folder, said nothing. The agent gestured. You don't have to read it, but they want you to know. The president didn't just approve the pension. He requested a debrief. Dean finally sat. Not fast, not slow, just finally. His voice came like gravel and iron. I'm not interested in medals. We understand. I'm not here to be thanked. We know. I just wanted what was written in the deal. The agent nodded. Dean looked at the folders, then up at the ceiling, then said, and now that I showed up, the agent finished it for him. They remember what they owe. The room hadn't changed. Still quiet, still cold, still lit by the kind of fluorescent glow that made everyone look paler than they were. But the energy in the air different now. The agent sat across from Dean, posture rigid but respectful, like a soldier who knew he was outranked but couldn't prove it on paper. Dean didn't speak right away. He let silence do the work. When you've spent years listening for the sound of distant gunfire before daring to breathe, you learn how to make waiting hurt more than shouting. The agent tried to mask it, but he kept glancing at the second folder, the one marked with the seal, the one no clerk in that office had clearance to even touch. Dean finally looked up. I want access. To what, sir? Project Sentinel. The agent blinked. Once. His voice stayed calm, but his breathing gave it away. Sir. That was shut down in 2007. Dean didn't flinch. Not for me. The agent hesitated. With all due respect, no one's mentioned Sentinel in over a decade. Dean leaned forward, just enough. Exactly. The agent exhaled through his nose. He reached into his coat, pulled out a secure keypad, and placed it on the table. Code. Dean didn't type. He spoke. 7 digits, slow and cold, like each number had been stored under his tongue for years. The screen blinked green. Access granted. The folder opened. Inside, only one sheet of paper. A name. Handwritten. Faded. Caleb Marrow. Dean stared at it. For a moment, the tension left his shoulders. Not in relief, but in return. Like someone had just handed him the weight he'd once buried under concrete and silence. I want his file reactivated. Sir, he's off record. buried 6 levels deep. Dead, according to the last update. Dean's voice was quieter now. He's not dead, just erased. The agent stayed still. This wasn't about money. Was never about pension. The old man had walked into the building not to get paid, but to wake up a ghost. Dean reached into his coat and pulled out a coin. Military issue. No country. Just an emblem. A scarred wolf's head with one eye scratched out. He placed it on the table. The agent stared at it like it might explode. "I need 5 minutes of satellite time," Dean said. Encrypted line. Off book. That's not protocol. It's not a request. The agent nodded slowly. Dean stood. As he walked toward the exit, the agent asked, "What happens if you're right?" Dean paused. Didn't turn around. "If I'm right, the pension was the least of their mistakes." Then he opened the door. And for the first time since 2007, Project Sentinel took a breath. The line didn't click. Pulsed. Secure channels never rang like regular phones. They opened like wounds, silent and clean, then waited for whoever had the courage to speak first. Dean stood alone in the secondary chamber, the keypad still glowing green behind him, his thumb resting lightly on the encrypted receiver. The satellite relay bounced through 3 nodes before stabilizing. Then nothing. No voice. No ID. Just breathing. Not heavy. Not weak. Just there, like someone trying to remember how to exist out loud again. Dean didn't speak either. Not at first. He just listened. Then one eye. Left. A pause on the other end. Then the breath shifted. A reply. 3 words. Horse. Raw. Right's gone now. Dean closed his eyes. That was it. That was proof. He didn't ask where the voice came from. Not yet. Because the fact it existed already changed the board. "You're in deep," Dean said. The voice coughed, not a sickness cough. A memory. They don't call it a facility. They call it a farm. Dean's jaw tightened. "How long?" The voice hesitated. "Time doesn't work here, but I count cracks. 612. That meant days. Not months. Not years. Days of silence, walls, code, and no sunlight. The kind of place where men were hidden not because they were dangerous, but because what they knew couldn't be buried with paperwork. "They told me Sentinel was over," Dean said. "They lied. Are you stable?" The voice laughed. Low. Bitter. "They used me, Dean. After Jakarta, I told them I wanted out. Next thing I remember, I was waking up in a cell with a drip in my neck and a therapist telling me I never existed." Dean's fingers curled around the edge of the table. He remembered Jakarta. Remembered the bodies. The silence after. And Caleb, the only man who walked out of that smoke with a loaded weapon and a blood-soaked flag. "I'm going to find you," Dean said. "You sure you still can?" Caleb replied. Dean's voice dropped a pitch. "You think I walked into that building today for a pension?" Another silence. Then, "They'll track this call." "They already are." Dean tapped the table twice. The line cut. No goodbye. No promise. Because for men like them, the only promise that mattered was showing up when no one else would. Dean turned to the agent in the next room. Held out the coin again. "I want a secure transport. 1 hour. No convoy. No name." The agent stared. "Where to?" Dean looked out the window. Wherever they buried him. Dean didn't wait for permission. He never had. The terminal room was cold and unstaffed, deep below the benefits office, behind 3 layers of access that hadn't been touched in over a decade. Most people didn't know it was there. That's how he knew it was the only place worth checking. He typed slowly, not because he didn't remember, but because some codes aren't meant to be rushed. He bypassed the front-end access, dropped into legacy protocols, and typed the 6-character key that hadn't been used since the day Sentinel shut down. The screen blinked once, then again, then loaded. Not a file. A map. Topographical.
Déserte terrain.
Southwest quadrant. No markings. No city names. But Dean didn't need them. There off to the side. A faint gray dot. Circular. Buried in a dead zone of satellite coverage. A facility only accessible via controlled airspace and a road not listed on any GPS. The name blinked briefly in the corner, then vanished. 1519, Black Wire. Dean exhaled slowly. Black Wire wasn't just off-grid. It was off-legend. A decommissioned test range. That's what they told the public. But he knew the truth. Black Wire had been the fallback site for red state containment, where unstable assets were held when no country, no trial, and no grave could contain them. It was where people like Caleb were sent to disappear, not because they failed, but because they succeeded in ways no one could explain. Dean downloaded what little data remained: a grainy satellite image, partial supply manifest, and a coded memo labeled Silence Active, Level Sigma. He didn't need more. He knew what that meant. Caleb wasn't just imprisoned. He was still under test. Dean shut down the terminal, walked back up the concrete stairs. Outside, the sun was setting. Orange sky, dry wind. A black SUV waiting at the curb, unmarked, engine running. The agent from earlier stood by the door, not speaking. Dean climbed in, said nothing. The SUV pulled away. As they crossed the city limit, the agent finally asked, "You're really going to Black Wire?" Dean looked straight ahead. "Yes. You realize no one comes back from there." Dean glanced sideways. "I'm not going to come back." And with that, the desert swallowed them. Because sometimes, justice isn't delivered in courtrooms. It's dug out of places no one dares to remember. The facility didn't look like a prison. That was the first problem. There were no walls, no gates, just a long, flat concrete approach stretching toward a hill that didn't show up on any map. From a distance, it looked like an abandoned airfield, a relic of some Cold War test site with rusted signs and radio towers long since dead. But Dean knew better. There's a difference between abandoned and concealed. And the quiet here was the wrong kind. Not desert silence. Programmed silence. The SUV stopped half a mile out. The agent handed Dean a sealed pouch. One earpiece. One foldable map with no labels, and one line. "You have 28 minutes. Dean didn't respond. He stepped out. The heat hit like a wall, dry, crackling, familiar. But his mind wasn't on weather. It was on rhythm, patterns. The way the gravel shifted under his boots. The way no wind moved past a certain point, like even nature obeyed some unseen perimeter. He reached the first marker, an old radio antenna with half its base buried in sand. This was it, the trigger zone. Not physical but psychological. Cross this line and the conditioning began. For most people that meant disorientation, memory loops, even blackouts. For people like Dean, it meant confrontation. He stepped across. Nothing moved, but everything changed. Inside his earpiece, static flared, then a faint voice. Not Caleb's. A system loop. Operator 0. Confirm origin. Dean ignored it. The static shifted. Now a whisper, his own voice, recorded years ago. "We don't leave our own. Not even in the dark." It was the final log he'd left in Sentinel's system before walking away from it all. They were using it against him. He moved faster now. Past a second marker, an old comms bunker half collapsed under sand. But the door was intact, and the keypad was still there. He typed 4 digits. The lock clicked. Inside, the room was cold. Too cold. It wasn't empty. In the corner, a chair. Straps. Blood long dried. And on the far wall, scratched words. "We forget what they make US remember." Dean stared at it. He'd seen that phrase before. In a journal Caleb's written during Sentinel Phase 3. It meant the loop had started. Caleb wasn't just being held. He was being rewritten. Not with torture. With memory. Dean stepped back outside, eyes narrowing. The wind had stopped completely. Even the air here refused to move. Then, from behind the hill, a sound. Faint metal repeated. A door. Opening. Dean reached into his coat. Fingers closed around something old. Something that didn't forget. Because when systems erase men like Caleb, they leave one weakness. Someone who still remembers exactly who he used to be. The corridor was longer than it looked. Bare walls. Flickering lights spaced too evenly. Dean counted them as he walked. 12. Always 12. Even when the hall stretched longer. That's how he knew this wasn't architecture, it was conditioning. Designed to disorient. Repeat. Fold memory against itself like static over a clear signal. But he wasn't here to play their loops. He knew his rhythm. Step, breath, glance left. Every third panel had a seam. That meant a camera. Every sixth, a reader. They were tracking him not to stop him but to record how he got here. Because this wasn't about keeping people out. It was about seeing who could survive going in. At the end of the hall, a door. Steel.
No lock.
It opened when he touched it. Inside, silence. And a man. Sitting. Facing away. Same build. Same haircut. Same shoulder twitch every few seconds like an old injury still remembered what caused it. Caleb. The man didn't move. Dean stepped forward. Cautious but not afraid. You remember me? The man stood. Same height. Same frame. But the turn was wrong. Too smooth. Too clean. Then he spoke. Dean Rivers. Veteran ID #X972. Sierra. Former Sentinel Alpha 2. Blood type O negative. Final exit log. November 3, 2007. Primary failure code. Disobedience. Dean didn't react. Not on the outside. But inside, the alarms lit up. This wasn't Caleb. This was a shell. Trained. Programmed. Wearing Caleb's skin. Dean circled him slowly. Where is the real one? The copy smiled. The smile was wrong. Memory is inefficient, it said. Emotion destabilizing. The subject known as Caleb Marrow is no longer operational. But his function continues. Dean stopped. You're not a guard. You're the test. The copy nodded. I'm version 4. Dean's voice dropped. What happened to 1 through 3? Each iteration terminated after contact with non-sentinel triggers. Yours included. Dean stepped closer. Now he saw it, the detail. The jacket too clean. The boots too light. The face too calm. You think you're him? I know I'm better. Dean exhaled through his nose. You can't be. You're still talking. Then he moved. Fast. Clean. One strike to the copy's throat. Another to its side. But it didn't fall. It reset. Like code rewriting in real time. Dean backed off. Recalculated. You don't remember Jakarta. I remember every line of data. That's not the same thing. The copy blinked. Then paused. A glitch. Just one frame. Dean saw it. Buried deep in the eyes. One flicker. Like a buried photo flashing on an old screen. He stepped closer. Lowered his voice. Caleb, if you're in there, even 1%, find the crack. Silence. The smile faltered. Just a fraction. Then it spoke. Not in code, but with a word no one else would know. Rosewood. Dean froze. That was the name of Caleb's dog. The one no system ever recorded. Somewhere inside, the real one was still breathing. And that meant one thing. This copy wasn't stable. Not yet. And if Dean could crack it open, he could get his friend back. He didn't look like a man who'd survived 4 versions of himself. Not anymore. The eyes were calm now, but not in the programmed way. There was something uneven behind them. A flicker that didn't match the coding. Dean knew that flicker. He'd seen it in Jakarta, when Caleb had crawled through fire dragging a man twice his size just because his boots were still warm. He'd seen it when orders told them to hold position, but Caleb moved anyway, because the right thing didn't always come from a command chain. The room was still, except for the quiet hum of the lights and the pulse of something neither alive nor dead standing in front of him, pretending to be his friend. Rosewood. That single word wasn't a passcode. It was a crack, a fracture in the programming. Dean stepped closer, lowering his voice, not like a threat, but like someone whispering to a man trapped behind glass. You remember the dog, right? The little brown mutt that bit your ankle before the mission. The one they told you to put down before deployment, but you didn't. You found a way to bring him along. No response. Just a faint muscle twitch near the right temple. A line of code skipping. Good. He leaned in more, eyes locked. They said loyalty would get you killed. You proved them wrong. Still no answer, but the breathing changed. Just slightly. Slower. Deeper. Rosewood used to hide under your cot. You'd toss him half your MRE. Remember that night we were pinned near the ridge? You didn't sleep. You just kept petting him to keep your hands from shaking. A flicker in the iris. Barely there. But real. Dean kept going. They didn't erase you. They just buried you under protocol. Under silence. But I know you, Caleb. You're not lines of code. You're not 4.0. You're a man. My brother. That did it. The clone staggered. Just a step. But enough. Hands twitched like trying to remember how to hold something that wasn't a weapon. Then the voice came. Broken. Human. I tried to hold on. They kept playing the voice. Yours. From Sentinel Base. Said you signed off the file. Said you let them take me. Dean's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. Because anything he said now had to be more than defense, it had to be real. So he walked forward and reached into his coat. Pulled out a patch. Worn. Frayed. The original Sentinel emblem. Scorched on the edge from Jakarta. He placed it in the clone's hand. I never signed anything, he said. They thought you were too dangerous to forget. So they locked you where no one would look. But I never stopped. The clone gripped the patch. Trembled. A low beep echoed from the wall. System warning. Identity breach. Protocol disruption. But neither of them looked away. Because this wasn't code breaking. It was memory resurfacing. And memory, true memory, always leaves scars. Dean. The voice was his now. Fully. No script. No filter. Just pain. And the beginning of clarity. Dean nodded once. Welcome back. The alarms didn't scream. They pulsed. Like a heartbeat getting faster, not louder. Red lights spun slowly in the corners, casting the room in flashes of warning and tension. But Dean didn't flinch. He'd been in rooms like this before. Rooms where silence meant death, and blinking lights meant someone upstairs had noticed something wasn't following the plan. Caleb stood in the center, gripping the patch like it was the only real thing left in a world that had lied to him for years. His hands were trembling, but his spine held straight, and the look in his eyes, it was shifting. The programming was still in there, buried like shrapnel, but cracks were spreading, and with every second, the man buried underneath the machine was clawing his way back. Dean, he said again, like trying the word out loud gave it weight. They made me forget everything. But the moment I saw you, he didn't finish. He didn't need to, because Dean understood. Sometimes presence breaks more chains than weapons. The system didn't know how to fight loyalty like that. The walls pulsed again, and a calm synthetic voice echoed through the room. Breach detected. Internal override initiated. Facility lockdown commencing in 30 seconds. Dean glanced at the wall. The countdown had begun. He stepped beside Caleb, grabbed his arm. Not like a handler, but like a friend who had waited too long to pull someone out of the dark. You trust me? Caleb looked down at the patch in his hand, then back at the man who had crossed classified lines, outlived his pension, and walked into hell without backup just to say, I remember you. He nodded. Yeah, I do. Then move. They ran. Not like escapees, but like men who remembered how to leave enemy ground without drawing fire. Dean led through the halls, cutting corners, navigating by memory and instinct. They passed walls Caleb hadn't seen in years, hallways that had changed color and shape under manipulation, but now seemed familiar again. The lockdown hit hard. Doors sealed. Systems kicked in. But none of them were faster than two men who had survived missions the world still denied had ever happened. At the perimeter gate, a voice broke through Caleb's earpiece. Return to holding. Subject reboot will commence. Do not resist. He ripped it off mid-run and crushed it under his boot. Dean barked. This way, old comms shaft. They never mapped it right. Caleb followed, breath short but steady. They reached the hatch behind the old radio tower. Dean kicked it once, hard. It gave way. Sunlight hit them like absolution. They didn't stop running until the hill swallowed the facility from view. Then they stopped. Not because they were safe, but because for the first time in over a decade, Caleb could breathe as himself. And Dean? He didn't need medals. This moment was the pension they never wanted to pay. The sun was low, hanging just above the ridge like it, too, had waited years to see Caleb free. They didn't speak for a while. No words were necessary. Just the sound of breath, two lungs working for themselves again. The wind moved different out here, away from wires and walls, away from the hum of lies wrapped in metal and protocol. Caleb stood with his hands on his knees, catching his breath, and Dean watched the horizon like it might try to steal this moment back. But it didn't. No alarms, no drones, no chase, just quiet. Eventually, Caleb straightened up. The lines in his face looked deeper than they should for his age, like the years locked inside that place had folded in on themselves, carving his story across bone and skin. He looked at Dean, not the way a soldier looks at a superior, but the way a brother looks at the only person who ever came back for him. "You know they'll come," Caleb said. Dean nodded. "Let them. I didn't come for revenge." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Then why?" Dean's answer was simple. "Because they tried to rewrite you. But I remember who you are. And now, so do you." A pause. Then Caleb pulled the patch from his pocket. Still clenched. Still warm. He opened his hand and looked at it like it was something holy. Then he knelt, placed it gently in the dirt, and covered it with a flat stone. "That part's over," he said. "I don't need a symbol anymore. I've got breath. That's enough." Dean cracked the smallest smile. "You always did talk too much once you started." "Yeah, well, turns out having your memory wiped for 8 years builds up a hell of a monologue." They both laughed. Quiet, but real. Not forced. Not written in any debrief report. A black SUV rolled up over the crest of the hill. The agent from before stepped out. No backup. No weapons drawn. Just an envelope in hand and a look of disbelief that they'd actually made it out. He handed it to Dean. "From the office." Dean took it, didn't open it. Just stared for a second, then handed it to Caleb. "You earned this more than I did." Caleb hesitated, then opened the envelope. Inside, an official reinstatement, a full pension retroactive to the date of his disappearance, and a small folded note in handwriting neither of them recognized. "Some men serve quietly. We hear you now." Caleb folded it back up. Said nothing. They rode out that evening on 2 motorcycles the agent had brought in without asking why, because sometimes orders come from places deeper than command. As the sun dropped and the world turned back to its noise, 2 veterans rode side by side. Not toward glory, not toward vengeance, just forward. Because the past tried to bury them. But they didn't die. They remembered. And now the world would too. Thank you for staying with us. All the way to the end. You didn't just watch a story. You honored the silence behind it. And in a world that moves too fast, that means more than you know. Military medal if this story stayed with you. Subscribe to Endless Stories, because we'll keep telling the ones that others forget. The quiet ones. The real ones. The ones that still matter.